Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crilley. I'm back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about artistic goals. We're going to be comparing, in the title I'll probably call it good goals versus bad goals, but the truth is I'm going to try to be a little more subtle about it. I'm going to be talking about what I would call healthy artistic goals versus unhealthy artistic goals. And you know me, I'm never one to sort of paint things in strict black and white terms. So we're going to hopefully learn something about these different motivating factors. You know, the word goals has become kind of a thing that you see on the internet almost. And I think that proves in a way that having a goal really is important to people. And certainly to artists, I think maybe it is especially important to have some sort of a goal as you get things done. Now, just to explain what I'm working on today, this is a panel from my upcoming book, The Comic Book Lesson, which will be in stores July 5th. But this just gives you something to look at as I get into my very first of the goals. I'm going to start with unhealthy and then move to a healthy, sometimes version of the same goal almost. Unhealthy, wanting to surpass some other artist or to have the same successes that they've had. People who've been watching my videos for a long time will have seen me talk about this before, but I do think that it can be a goal, and specifically somebody can, one artist can see some other artist having achieved something or getting a lot of attention that they don't get or whatever, and it all comes down to almost envying that artist and saying, I want that for me. And of course, the very worst form of this is almost like, I want to beat them, I want to get the attention they're getting, and I want for them to fail. And of course, that, I think, plainly is unhealthy, and I certainly hope that no one is using that as their motivating factor, wishing for some other person to, for you to replace them almost in terms of the success that they get. So let's move from that, which I certainly don't think is a very admirable goal, and to see a different version of it that I would call the healthy version. Wanting to see steady improvement in your own work, wanting to learn new techniques, etc. You're not comparing yourself to some other person, except maybe comparing yourself to yourself and saying, can I get better than I was last year? That kind of thing, I think, is, of course, very healthy, and that is, to me, the healthier version of that, wanting to surpass some other artist. Instead of focusing on, getting what some other artist has in terms of their career or their successes or awards or whatever, focus on just getting better beyond your own previous work. And especially this idea of learning new techniques. I'm always trying to learn new techniques, challenge myself to do new things that I've never done before. And that is, that's a feeling of progress. Even if if you sort of feel like you're beating your head against the wall, trying to get better at this one thing, and you're not seeing the improvement, try learning new techniques. Try learning some new way of creating art. Sometimes it's demoralizing to just keep pushing yourself against this one thing that you're not seeing so much improvement in. And perhaps the trick is to learn some new approach, some whole new way of making art. Maybe that's the one that will, unlock the door for you. All right, let's move on to the next unhealthy goal. Wanting your art to make you super wealthy. Wanting everything you do to translate into financial gain. Now this is an interesting one, and I think there's a lot of subtlety between the two different levels. Wanting your artwork to translate into financial gain is not a bad thing in and of itself, but I would say getting obsessed with the sort of dream of tremendous wealth is, to my mind, not a very worthy goal, and also you're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment, frankly, that your art becoming hugely successful in financial terms is a little bit beyond your control. You can try, of course, you can create work that is accessible, You can create work that maybe seems to be following trends. You can do all kinds of things that maybe improve the chances of your work making money. But in the end, it is up to the decisions of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out there who either are into what you're doing or not. And that's a little bit, I have found, beyond your control. It cannot be engineered, sadly. And so that's why I wanted to get that in there as something that can be a little bit unhealthy. And especially this idea of I want everything that I do as an artist to translate into financial gain immediately. Well, again, that's kind of not the way it works, I would say. A lot of these things take circuitous paths towards something that eventually leads you to success. And if you're wanting to see a sort of one-for-one financial reward immediately for everything that you do, again, I think you're setting yourself up for disappointment, probably. But no, there's nothing wrong with wanting financial reward. In fact, that is the healthy version of the same goal in a way, wanting to eventually be able to turn your art into a full-time job. There's nothing wrong with that as your goal, but you'll notice that I put the word eventually in here because sometimes even that is a little bit beyond your control. To do it as a full-time job, to do it as a part-time job is maybe a good place to start, and there's nothing wrong with that. When I look back on my life, I feel like in a way the big prize that I won was being able to do this as a full-time job. And I don't mean just creating comics, but in my case it ended up being things like public speaking and all sorts of other, a sort of patchwork of different things that I ended up doing. Even now, I've got a Patreon going, right? I've found different ways over the years of supporting myself. But in the end, it all comes down to the same thing, and that is every morning I wake up and I'm doing something creative. And that in itself is the dream. It's not so much about, I've become wealthy or I drive a fancy car. I certainly don't. But to me, simply being able to do it full time, as I have done all the way back since 1995, that in and of itself is a dream come true for me. And I would love for as many people as possible who are watching this video to be able to do that. Because it is such a wonderful thing, but it's not easy, and it may be a matter of eventually. For some of you out there, that it takes a while to get there, to find a way of making it translate into a full-time job. Let's move on to the next one. The unhealthy goal. Wanting your art to be perfectly flawless and beyond criticism. I almost have to laugh as I say this, because of course nothing is beyond criticism. Certainly not these days with the internet. Anything that you do almost certainly will be criticized. I'm going to go ahead and switch to using some pastel here, which is actually something that I do use in the final illustrations of the comic book lesson. It gives a nice sort of smoky look. It's very easy to blend these, get all kinds of effects using pastels. But so yeah, this idea of wanting your work to be perfect, that is of course, perfectionism famously, when you get too carried away with it, can mess you up. And you find yourself endlessly tweaking one thing, seeking some sort of perfection. Now this, I would say, is another one that it's not black or white, some people who are perfectionists, that's an important part of what gets them eventually to a real masterpiece. So I got to be careful how I phrase this. I don't want to say it's wrong to be a perfectionist. No, I don't think that's true. I think for some people, what we might call perfectionism is just part of their artistic instinct, and it eventually pays off. I guess what I'm talking about is for the people for whom it becomes counterproductive, and it becomes a problem almost, that they, because they are not attaining perfection, they keep sort of throwing the pencil down in disgust and quitting almost, because it's like, I got this in my mind, it's perfect, but as soon as I try to turn it into a real thing, it's never as good as I imagined it in my mind. And those are the people for whom I would say perfectionism is getting in the way, really, and that you need to sort of say, hey, you know what? This thing that I'm working on right now doesn't need to be perfect. And maybe the next thing that I do doesn't need to be perfect either. And it's all part of a long journey towards improvement. And maybe eventually, after a period of years, I will create that thing that I myself look at and say, perfect, this is it. This is what I've wanted to do. And that maybe is the healthier version of perfectionism. But again, you know, according to that original thing about wanting your work to be beyond criticism, you know, I just want to say good luck with that, because, you know, frankly, my work from the beginning has sought to be accessible and kind of people-pleasing. But does that mean that my work has never been criticized? Far from it. No, of course. I've had bad reviews. You can't make one thing that pleases everybody, right? I mean, that just sort of is against the fundamentals of what it's all about. There will be people who get what you're doing. There will be people who love what you're doing. But there will always be people who don't get what you're doing. And very often they almost do you the favor of revealing in their criticism that they just don't like the whole basic type of thing that you're doing. And so you don't even have to take that personally. It's like, yeah, well, you don't like comics, or you don't like manga, or you don't like whatever, you know, the highly realistic art. And yeah, it's a losing battle, really, to want never to have anyone criticize what you're doing. And I just, and in a way, a lot of these things are born of my own experience. And I guess I did, in the early days, want everyone to love everything that I do. And, you know, that really is, eventually, you're going to come face to face with criticism. Maybe not to your face, but in written form somewhere along the line. And I would say it's only recently, really, that I've come to what I would call a more healthy acceptance of the fact that, no, not everyone's going to like everything that I do. That's just the way it goes. Focus on the people who get it. Focus on the people who are supportive and, you know, are lifting you up with their words, rather than those people who are tearing you down. Hopefully you don't encounter too many of those. Now, I'm going to take a moment to switch to the beloved white gouache. You'll never see me criticizing my beloved white gouache, to add some highlights as we get into the last, well, how many have we got to go here? I think it's only maybe 2 more to go, 3 more to go. Okay, we'll be right back. All right, well, I think we've got quite enough of the highlights in here by now. And I might even switch to my colored pencils, you know. It's not a Mark Crilley video until there's like 7 different art supplies in play. But let's go ahead and move on to this next one. I would say a healthy goal. Wanting your art to have more depth to it, for it to be more personal. This one relates actually to me. I think when I first started off doing comics, the work was not super personal. It was about being entertaining, really, primarily, making people laugh, hopefully like charming people in a way. But as I went along, I did find that I wanted it to be more personal. People have heard me refer to the Beatles maybe too many times, but I think the journey of the Beatles is probably emblematic of that movement from, kind of just straightforwardly commercial stuff in their early days to increasingly personal stuff. And it didn't take them very long. I think by their third or fourth album, you could see them starting to delve more into their own thoughts about the world, personal memories of things, and so forth. And so I think that certainly is a worthy goal, and that's you've seen that happen with my own work. I guess that's why I want to do it and include that in there. And my latest book, graphic novel, My Last Summer with Cass, is probably the most personal that I've done, and I am working on a book that is set in Taiwan that hopefully will be out next year. That also fairly personal in that I lived in Taiwan, and a lot of it is informed by my memories of my own life there. So I think that's a great goal for artists. But I should maybe, on top of this, caution that that's not going to be everybody's goal. Some people just, their work is not obviously personal, and there's nothing wrong with that. So certainly don't take that as, here's a goal that every artist on earth ought to have. No, I certainly don't mean that. Let's move on to this next one. And as I do, I'm probably going to switch over to using some colored pencil, get a little more warmth to this illustration by way of yellows, I think. One last unhealthy goal. Wanting your art to go viral, get loads of views, likes, etc. This has come up in a lot of my videos before, but everybody's video could be their first video. And if this is my first video for you, thank you for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying it. But yeah, I think for someone like me who grew up in the days before the internet, this whole thing of having views and likes and sort of a numerical measure of success is a kind of a new thing. Not completely new. I mean, people who made books in the past, there was always the New York Times bestsellers list and, number of books sold. I suppose there's always been some numerical way of measuring success. But with the internet, I think even amateur people, almost everyone who engages with social media, has this numerical quantifiable measure of success, although I don't think it should be viewed that way, but I'm sure a lot of people can't help but view it as, boy, I'm not getting any views. That means what I'm doing isn't important or whatever, and I just feel bad in a way for the new generation if artists fall into that trap of just thinking, man, I gotta get more views, I gotta get more likes, It seems like almost a corrosive thing that could happen to you as an artist if you start to get obsessed with that. And, for me, I guess YouTube gave me a personal experience of that. I had videos that would get millions of views, and it's thrilling, It's like, oh my God, look at this. Why I'm a success now. Look how many people like my video or whatever. But, again, as I said earlier, for some of this other stuff, is beyond your control, virality. You've seen an awful lot of companies and so forth trying to make viral videos, and it just doesn't happen. So much of this stuff is beyond your control. And certainly, I think when it comes to matters of art, that it shouldn't come down to numbers of likes and so forth. If your work is connecting with a small audience and it means something to them, or, theoretically, even if you have no audience at all, that doesn't mean that your art isn't important or worthwhile or even great. There have been artists whose work is discovered largely after they have died. Not to, get morbid about it or make you think you're going to go to your grave without ever having an audience. I certainly don't mean to suggest that, but, that the fact that has happened in the past and that, like I think if you were to bring Johann Sebastian Bach, into the modern world and say, look how important your music is, he might be a little surprised because I don't think his work was so well known in his day. I'm not sure if I know the facts completely, but or someone like Vincent van Gogh, he went to his death assuming probably that his paintings were only known by who knows, a few thousand people or whatever. He certainly would never have imagined the glories of success that his work went on to have. So if you hunger for that kind of attention and success and sort of validation, just never give up hope, really, because it can happen. You've created something that goes out into the world, and you don't know what's going to happen with that eventually, even, I dare say, past your own death. It may connect with people when you're not even here anymore. But I would kind of sum up that I don't think about that stuff so much. I try to stay away from this way of seeking validation by way of these numbers of people who like my work or whatever. I think in a way it's best if you can keep your head in the work itself and say, hey, the job of, or the experience of creating something is enjoyable in and of itself. And you don't need the numbers, you don't need the likes or whatever to justify what you're doing. Anyway, I've talked about that before. Probably people are sick of hearing me go on about it, but I do think it's an important message. Let's move on to the final one, which I would call a healthy goal. Wanting your art to resonate with people, for it to be a means of communication. And that, I think, is the healthier version of that, wanting likes or whatever. I think it's natural as an artist to want your work to be a way of communicating. And when it does connect with another person and they say, yeah, boy, I've had that same experience, or, your story meant so much to me because it was as if you were telling my story. There's something wonderful about that. And let's face it, the experience of being an artist is sometimes an isolating thing. You're in a room by yourself, as I am right now, creating a video or whatever. And when you do find that it connects with people and they respond to it, you feel joined up with the rest of the human race in a way. And at least for me, that is important, that feeling of connection, that feeling that you've tapped into something that resonates with people. I think that's a worthy goal, and something that maybe you do have control over in a way. The more you put your own personal experiences into something, the more likely there's something there, I think, that resonates with people. And I believe that brings us to the end of this video. Hang on, I'm going to go ahead and grab my books so that I can thank those of you who have supported me by getting them, like the drawing lesson. This is the first book in the series. What you saw me working on today is the second one, the comic book lesson. And, of course, there's also the 2-pencil method, my book that shows you how to make drawings like this with just 2 pencils, and Mastering Manga 1, 2, and 3. I really cannot thank those of you enough for having supported me by getting those books, but I think it's time for me to lay down this pencil. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.